Hello, everyone. On this episode of Let's Talk About I talked to my friend, Vinny Spotleson, who is a high school history teacher here in the Las Vegas Valley. And we get into a lot of things about the ethics that surrounds the use of AI in high school and society in general, since he is on the front line of it all. I hope you enjoy. Hello, welcome to the podcast. Let's Talk About AI. And at first, I just want to get your ideas about AI so that we're all on the same page. What do you know about AI and how do you use it if you do?
Well, thank you. And I am, first off, my name is Vinny. I'm a
Oh,
teacher,
yeah.
and no problem. And I also used to work in government for a long time, but the emergence of AI really has happened during my teaching career. I see a lot of use of AI in my classroom, and a lot of our fellow teachers are actually using AI to generate lesson plans, to refine prompts, to identify good sources. I teach history specifically, so we have folks that are like, what are some good primary and secondary documents related to event? Like, for example, one of the things we just went through was the bubonic plague. And
Okay.
so it can help pull those things really fast and really
Mm-hmm.
efficiently. Um, and then in terms of AI, I think what I know about it, what I've seen is the machine learning has really gotten good for the language models, and the visual has been brilliant as well. I'm seeing more in the audio space. I've even
Yeah.
heard talk of some of the studies that are happening trying to train machine learning on smell and taste and the challenges that has. So they
Yeah.
are really
I'm.
trying to go through all the senses now.
Yeah. That makes sense, though. I think the more senses you give it, the more capable it will become. Um, Although I think, at least for the big companies, OpenAI and Google and all those, I think they're just focusing more on audio and visual right now. So they're actually trying to take their LLMs, their large language models, and stick um, the audio and visual to it as well. So I
Yeah.
think actually they're going to be rebuilding them from the ground up. So the neural networks will include everything.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah,
And then but where I'm seeing it the most is the students. And
yeah,
a whole time I've been teaching, with my fourth year, and then doing some student teaching before that. One of the common things that we're trying to break, a habit that this generation gets into, is copy paste question into the Google search bar, copy paste
hmm,
first search result, and then copy paste answer. And that was really easy to catch. Think about Googling things before AI.
yeah, yeah.
You would just get web pages, maybe some bolded text. Who knows if it's somebody that paid to be up there, or if it's the SEO, like the search engine that's optimized. So
Hmm.
sometimes you just get complete nonsense. Now, when students do that same thing with a chat GPT or even a Google AI, or any of these other models, I mean, it's spitting out accurate answers. It's spitting out, the students that are more sophisticated know to tell it to, reduce the vocabulary to a high school level. you know, uh,
Yeah, and
they
document.
can
Yeah.
feed it specific examples that they want it to use from the assignments we've assigned. So it even seems like they lifted it from their prior knowledge, having done the earlier assignment the week
Hmm.
before.
Hmm.
And it's really created a lot of confusion and consternation amongst teachers, because to a certain extent, that's actually really good job by these students for being so resourceful and
Yeah.
getting the answers that they need. But we also are having trouble evaluating, how are they thinking, what do they know, do
Yeah.
they understand the context of what the AI is spitting out, and those sorts of things.
Hmm. Yeah. It brings up a lot of different questions you can go down, right? A lot of different roads. And considering this episode, I want to focus on more of the ethics and societal impacts of this. I think that actually would be perfect to go down those roads, which is like, does that matter in the future where AI is everywhere, right? How
Mm-hmm.
how much do we care about what the students, or rather, what exactly are we trying to teach them, right? Like, what is it that you want to focus on?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that I've totally decided. I'll tell you a little bit about where I think the Clark County School District is going, on what we're hearing
Hmm.
from the administration. And that is that the adjustments to the curriculum lately have been less going through history in blocks of time. Okay, we're doing the Middle Ages, then we're doing the Renaissance, then we're doing Industrial Revolution, and then we're doing, the World Wars, right? And what it's been much more is theme based, where it's like, okay, let's do a unit on revolutions as a topic, or on culture as a topic, or we have a unit that's on war as a topic. And I think the idea of what the district is trying to go is going, okay, we want the students to have the knowledge of the general concepts, and then they'll use the devices to plug in the specific information that they need or that they're interested in about a specific topic. And
that's interesting, yeah.
And it does make sense, right? Like, is it super important to remember, okay, the Spanish Armada was defeated in the, in 1588? Not necessarily,
Yeah. So, like, if we don't need them to learn specific facts, especially, ever since Google, we didn't really need to know those specific facts in Wikipedia, right? That is able to give us those answers. Then it would be more like, what kind of society, or how are they going to function in a society, right? We want to teach them, like, the basics of ethics and morals, right? And then how do those coalesce with, like you said, war or culture or religion, right? And so their ideas on those, I guess, are more important.
If I could build off that just for a sec, because I think, to your point, we want them to be voters, right? In America, or in, I mean, I would support democracy anywhere in the world, right? So the kind of fundamental philosophy behind that is that you have an informed citizenry that's making decisions. So then you take a step back and you realize, okay, education, common refrain is education is the foundation of a democracy. Which, to aside, is kind of funny that we don't have a constitutional right to education, but that's another conversation. But
it was made a long time ago.
Right. But we want these folks to be future voters. And that's something that is a goal of my classroom. Isn't that you're going to vote Republican or Democrat, isn't that you're going to have an ideology, or isn't that you're going to have a specific ideology, rather. But my goal is that students, by the end of the year, are starting to develop a political ideology, starting to develop opinions on things. And that's where I just don't think we've figured out yet what is the difference between, okay, we're using AI to recall facts and things like that, and then how are we actually going to form our opinions based off of that? That's been something we're working on at our school every day, trying to build lessons towards.
And it makes me wonder too about how much people are going to have opinions on things in general, right? How much are they going to just kind of like let ChatGPT or something else think for them? It's like, what is my opinion on this? And they just ask that, right? And so, it does. It brings up a lot of ethical questions. And so, how much responsibility are we going to take on ourselves, right, for our own actions and our own opinions, rather than just defaulting to some other entity?
Yeah, and to get to that, one place where I did come down hard on my students this year was around, like, going back to the district goals. One of the thinking around this is for them to create. So they learn the facts and the figures, they get that information from whatever sources, and then can they create their new things using that baseline, And so one of our assignments, for example, was about culture and we were using monuments. We looked at examples of the ancient wonders. We looked at some of the more current stuff, like Statue of Liberty. We looked at corporate logos, and then so we had them sort of do this imagining exercise. If they were, in charge of a culture or society, what sort of monument would they build, And I had students going to ChatGPT for that. It's just like, wait, hold on. I did not ask the robots to do this. I'm asking for you. And it's like, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to, that one we got to nip in the bud there.
And so I think we do need to start shifting that kind of society or social thinking to taking personal responsibility. I mean, that should have always been implied for all of us for a long time. But at least in my opinion, I've noticed society, a lot of people tend to try to shift responsibility off of them. It's like, that's kind of what lawyers and insurance companies do. It's like, well, whose fault is it? It's not mine. The first response is to say it's not my fault, or to not take responsibility. And so I do think we need to bring back that personal responsibility and how we conduct ourselves, and because like a lot of like you said, they'll be able to ask ChatGPT anything, even for this monument assignments. But how much of that do we want to? How much should they do right by
Yeah.
themselves, and how much should we do there? And I think that's a question that I don't know if we have figured out, and I don't know if it will be possible to figure out right now. It's something that we need to talk about. Like, what's
And
the limits there?
yeah, and how do we we use the term scaffolding a lot in education, right? Of like, you
Mm-hmm.
have the supports for the building as you're constructing it, and then you start to peel them away, and the students can do more on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we
Okay, yeah,
have
that makes sense.
we have a robot that'll fly you up to the top. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah,
the idea,
and
how do
build it
you
for you.
scaffold that so that they're using the tools, maximizing this new technology, building up and doing more themselves, but
Mm-hmm.
also not leaving it behind, because we know that this is going to be a reality in the future.
Yeah, yeah. So also, if we're going to talk about government too, since you were in government,
Mm-hmm.
like, how much should we rely on these systems too in government? Right? How much should we, or how much should government even take over some of these things? Because I feel like having a private company trying to create these machines and then having all of us use them might not be the best for us, right? It might
Yeah,
be.
I absolutely agree. I feel like combining kind of my background in history, my background in government, we are in a space where we are in desperate need of a sort of whole new layer of regulatory, like a whole new regulatory regime to look at this. And
Mhm.
I think of this as, if you look at the early 1900s, the problems we had with monopolies, and the
Yeah.
way that
Hmm.
it seems like such an intractable problem. It's such a huge part of the economy, is these sort of giant industrial monopolies that grew up. And then the government slowly started to break them up and get
Hmm.
them regulated and get them under control. And I feel like that's the case for almost the entire internet. What I'd like to see, just a proposal that I'm sort of throwing out there, is some sort of constitutional amendment that would both protect our access and our rights to some of these things. Because in some authoritarian countries, you see problems like, they don't like a protest is happening, they just shut off the internet, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
I would like to build safeguards for our access.
Hmm.
I'd like to build safeguards for our data, and then something that provides a constitutional foundation to also start regulating and reining in some of this big tech
Hmm.
and some of how AI
Yeah.
functions.
Yeah. And that's the reason why I'm doing this podcast, right? To have more people talk about it, because there's a lot of conversation happening. I notice a lot more podcasts on YouTube and other places talking about AI, but I think the general public needs to get involved in this. To do a constitutional amendment would be really, really big. You can't do that very easily with 2/3 of the states and whatnot. So you need to have a very big discourse amongst the
Mm-hmm.
public. You need a grassroots movement to do this. Um, do you have any specifics of what you would want to see? Like it's almost too broad, right? And the ideas are so nebulous right now. It's hard to say, like, well, I want this done, but what is it? What do we want done?
Yeah, and there's a few different things, because there's also, just to put a flag in a topic that we should talk about, there's the fact that AI is starting to and will only wreak more havoc on our economy and certain
Mm-hmm.
jobs that aren't going to exist, and how do you deal with those impacts as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
first, getting to the first step of the regulating tech. I mean, I think, one, we do need to protect our access, even though we have it now. I think while we have it, and while there's relative, we should ensure that freedom continues into the future.
Ensure access to the AIs. Is that what you're saying?
I would say just the broader internet. I'd like to see it broader. I don't
Internet.
know how
Just
you would
okay.
term it, because I don't
Okay.
necessarily just mean computers or smartphones. I mean this whole connected internet web of
Mm-hmm.
information that we have.
Okay.
Um,
Communications.
Communications, yeah. And then I think that there'd also have to be a protection on the consumer side, on our end. For AI specifically, I'd be interested in what you think, because a lot of the conversation seems to be coming around the copyright issues. And is this just plagiarism? Do we need to do
Yeah.
something there?
Yeah, for creative rights, I don't know. Like it's such a complex thing, and I could throw out some kind of really broad ideas, but I haven't thought about them, or they haven't been analyzed enough where you'd be able to be like, yeah, this is a good idea, because there's probably going to be lots of pitfalls. But for like copyright, right? Um, it's almost like copyright, or rather just intellectual property almost doesn't even exist anymore, right? Because it's like it's so hard to regulate what these machines can make, right? Because it is no different than somebody observing some piece of art and then kind of using that to inspire their own stuff,
Yeah.
right? It's like, yeah, you could say like you can't make, let's say, I know Mickey Mouse is in the public domain now, but let's say, Mickey Mouse, you can't copy it 100% exactly. But people have done lots of different things. And then also, I think our First Amendment rights give us the ability to do what, like
Parody protections. You
parody
could,
and stuff. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So it's very already kind of hard to do. And so you almost just want to say like, well, this is probably not the right path to go down. Just let's kind of get rid of it. And then, patents are already kind of a mixed bag too, because patents, the whole point is that people can patent their idea and get paid for it. And it kind of encourages this, creation of new
Entrepreneurship. Yeah.
ideas. But a lot of people use patents as a kind of a way to attack as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of defending their own ideas, they kind of go after others or to stop new ideas entirely, right? People buy patents and then just kind of kill it because it attacks their own kind of
Yeah.
interests. And so, yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing anymore. Maybe it's a whole thing that we need to rethink.
Right, and I think you're absolutely right. A company like Disney, it's like, am I really going to feel sorry for a company that basically stole a bunch of fairy tales that were,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
made them
That we're
into
in the public
movies,
domain and
and now
privatize
you're
it.
exactly. I think the
Yeah.
other thing we'd want to prevent is sort of automated government decision making,
Mm.
and I feel like in that sense, our Constitution does sort of have some built-in protections, but it would be
Hmm.
great to have those either in this amendment or more legislation to build off of that.
Yeah.
Because one of the things we do is we have discretion in a couple senses, right? Like a police officer has discretion, but then the ultimate form of discretion we have is the jury trial.
Hmm.
That you
Yeah.
could have done the murder and the jury can still say, yeah, and that's okay because of these circumstances, you go free.
Yeah.
It's not like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have this
Yeah.
letter of the
Yeah.
law and we have to follow it.
Yep.
So
This check and balance, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That makes sense to have for AI. But what is the check and what is the balance, right? Especially because if AI is smarter than us and it makes better decisions than us, why wouldn't we want to listen to it? Um,
mm-hmm.
and so, yeah, what kind of rules in place? Then some human just needs to look at it and say it's okay. Um, that could work, although I could also see that making things very slow. But at the same time, government's already slow, so
Right.
it's probably not going to be any worse than what we have already. Um, but I think that would just be more for like public policy making. Like, it's really easy to say you have a problem. What's the optimal solution for like money and people? Just making more lives better. But yeah, definitely when it's come to enforcing laws, like we don't want to have any kind of AI doing that. I don't think
Yeah.
because yeah, that can be very problematic really fast. You'll end up with like Terminator type stuff where some
Right.
you,
Although
you can, yeah.
I could see the argument that you're saying of, police officers in the heat of the moment, getting really heated, getting really upset, pull the
Hmm.
trigger, innocent person dies.
Yeah,
Is a
yeah.
robot going to commit that same mental, you know what I mean? So it's going to
Yeah.
be itchy because I think that's going to be more and more of the debate going forward
Oh
is,
yeah. I
are
mean,
we
and
really
it's
going to
already
let
happening on
this?
the. Sorry, you're going.
No, what were you saying?
I was just going to say it's already happening on the warfield. Right? When in battles, it's already happening. So I could see it coming to enforcement as well,
Mm-hmm.
law enforcement.
Yeah, and that's something that I would like to see some global treaties around of just like, we're not going
Yes.
to let AI
Yep.
kill people. And
Yeah. I mean,
what's
it is
encouraging there,
happening. Drones
and
are doing it right now, but that is something that we need to regulate. We say like this is um, not good.
yeah.
It just we should just ban it completely.
And when Biden and Xi met in person, in San Francisco, there was some really troubling readouts from that meeting that aren't
Hmm.
fun. But one of the good
Yeah.
ones is there was a strong consensus. And so if the two most powerful countries on earth can really formalize that into an agreement and start to create a global regime around that,
Yeah.
hopefully that
Yeah.
could start to be enforced.
Yep.
Then we were talking about the copyright and the people that I do feel bad for. I was saying I don't feel bad for Disney, and I could just hear a couple of my artist friends being like, "Well, feel bad for
Yeah. Yeah.
me,"
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and that is
Yeah.
something that's worrying. Yeah.
Um, the thing is though, and we can talk about how people will be paid as well, because that's another thing to consider is if there's massive job loss, we need to also guarantee people will be taken care of, including like artists. But I believe maybe can't predict this, but people will still look for human made art and human made stuff because that's what they like. It's like chess, right? You can have chess has not really been solved, but kind of solved for like 20 years, right? Ever since Deep Blue came out in 1997. Um, no grandmaster can beat an AI anymore. But people still love to watch, all the chess people play
Yeah.
on YouTube, and there's still a huge scene around that. In fact, it's probably bigger now than it ever has been. And so I think people still like to watch humans do certain things. And with robotics being advanced as it is now, like we're going to have or be capable of building like a football team of robots that can play football perfectly. But like, do we want to watch that? Not really. I don't know how many people would care. I mean, some people might. There's battle bots, right? People might care, like a battle
Yeah.
bot situation where football gets really kind of violent. but I think people would there still be a audience for human made stuff, right?
That's a great
So
point because especially things don't always just replace the other thing that came
mhm.
before it. These can be
Yeah,
additive too.
yeah,
And then I think if you want to get into that conversation, I think what you were alluding to for artists or other folks that are out of work is, AI just really drives the need for some sort of universal basic income or
hmm,
or some sort of plan like that.
yeah.
And I
Just
think. Oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
Oh yeah, just as a safety net, right? Because I mean, I don't think anyone can make an argument that this is not going to keep advancing. This is going to keep advancing. It's going to get better and better. And you might be able to make an argument for the number of jobs new jobs in the future will kind of outpace the jobs that it's taking over. I don't believe that though, only because whatever a job a human can do, if this is human like, it can do that job too. Anything we can create in the future, it'll be also be able to do. But let's say that there's lots of jobs in the future. Um, I think there could be a period where you're going to have significant problems, right? Like um, the Great Depression, right? The Great Depression was that kind of change in technology, and a lot of people. It was a very hard time for like a decade, right? And I don't think we should do that again.
Yeah.
I feel like there should be um, some kind of period where we'll be able to take care of ourselves without everything going to have a giant mess. And not only that, like the solution to that was Social Security, right?
hmm
We as soon as we made Social Security, the economy got a lot better. Um, and so we should kind of do that preemptively, in my opinion.
Well, I
Kind of
agree.
get this done before we have a Great Depression like change in our economy.
I love the example of the Great Depression you brought up, and it
Yeah.
gets to a point because during the Great Depression, during the 1930s in the New Deal era, there was a debate, and there was all this legislation coming out to how to fix things, how to fix people, how to deal with the sort of newly fully industrialized economy because it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of in its final form by the 1930s. A lot of people probably don't know there was huge swaths of America that didn't have electricity
Mm-hmm.
before the New Deal electrified kind of the whole country. So the one of the two pieces of legislation, I can't remember exactly what year, but during the 1930s, before the war, there was a competing bills, and one of them was a minimum wage, and one of them was a 32-hour work week.
Okay.
And the compromise legislation that came out was the 40-hour work week with a minimum wage.
Mm.
And I don't know all the specifics of why those you couldn't do both, But to think that here we are almost 100 years later and we're still at the 40-hour work week,
Yeah, yeah,
when they could already see that technology was providing more time, and
yeah, yeah,
instead what we've done is somehow we're working more than we worked 100 years ago,
yeah.
which is just wild.
Hmm.
Is it even desirable that all those jobs, or that everybody's working all this time? And we sort of have this fetishized hustle work. Oh, I worked
Hmm.
80 hours this week. I'm just the
Yeah,
hardest worker. It's like, how much time do you spend with your kids?
yeah, yeah,
Maybe that's actually
yeah,
the thing that we should do. How much time did you
yeah.
enjoy your life?
This
I would love to
goes.
see that we're just working less, and that we've built an economic system that capitalizes on these robots. Not that they
Uh,
become just these like workhorses that that do everything for us, but that we use the ways that they've increased productivity and save time, that we're benefiting from that and
I
have more time
guess,
for leisure.
but at the same time, what would we do then? Right? If we're gonna have these things not be workhorses completely, right? They do some of the work. Like, what do we do then? What is left for us, or what do we want to do? And in my opinion, I don't know if we should or care to work at all. Just be like, let's have them do it, and then we can focus on ourselves, right? Take care of our kids, just enjoy life. Um,
I mean, definitely what
and
is
then,
work would have to
yeah,
change,
yeah,
and
yeah.
how jobs
And then
are.
it goes back to education. What's the point of it?
Mhm.
What's the point of that? I still think, though, there is a lot to educate on, again, with like morals and ethics, right? That's probably what we should kind of shift our focus to, about what is the philosophies behind those. What's a good life? How to live it? And how do we treat each other? Make sure we treat each other with respect and personal responsibility. Um, but then, like, there's no real point of advanced math. I think, basic math and stuff, math, reading, writing, all those things would be necessary, even if we don't have to work at all, because that just makes life easier if you can read a book and enjoy it, or be able to solve simple math problems because
Mhm.
you're doing arts and crafts, right? In your arts and crafts, you need certain beads, a certain number of beads. Being able to figure that out is helpful. Um, but yeah, other than that, I don't know
And I
what we
do
want either.
believe that there's some people in certain types of work that people like doing. Like, I like teaching.
Yeah,
And if you
yeah,
told me my salary was guaranteed and I get to go teach high school, there's probably a little bit of stuff I would change about the job, but I
yeah,
could see myself still wanting to spend 9 months a year doing that, and I'm sure there's
yeah.
people that are car mechanics or farmers or anything else.
Hmm.
And so giving people that choice and empowering them around that, I still think there'll be sort of work to do or
Yeah,
optional work,
yeah.
but giving people more choices and more time.
Yeah, and that's really what it
That,
comes down to, is choices. Being able to give people freedom, right?
yeah.
And it's kind of like the ideal way of thinking about it, is giving people the freedom to choose what kind of life they want.
And I do think there's this sort of innate drive. I hate to say it because it's kind of cultural, but you can look at other cultures too, like the Soviet Union, right?
Hmm.
Not known for being the most creatively, the best for
Yeah,
a creative outlet. But you still get Tetris,
yeah, yeah,
invented in
yeah,
the Soviet Union. You still have literature. You still have some great movies that are made, and so just the fact that people sort of were, and this is kind of an American construct of it, but the idea that they were totally taken care of by communism and didn't have to work, not true of the Soviet Union, but
hmm,
even if it was, people still wanted to and still
hmm,
did stuff, even if they
hmm.
didn't have to pay
Yeah,
a heating bill,
yep, yep. Um, I think they'll be true, right, in the future as well. And this is like the ideal future. So now that we've built this ideal future of what we want to happen, now it's, how do we do it, right? What are the steps to do? What are the steps to take to carry out that future? Um, how do we make sure that we can do what we want and do the work that we want and make sure that we're all taken care of? I think one of those steps is the universal basic income, or like an
Mm-hmm.
expansion on Social Security, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially how I think it would be done. I think a lot of people are kind of um, not okay with the idea of universal basic income. So you just say Social Security, everyone likes that, expand that to everybody.
Yeah.
um, and
I like
regardless
that.
of employment, regardless of age, and just do it.
Well, and there's these real world examples that we can point to. The pandemic, is a great
Hmm.
example of universal basic income and us, the American government, really figuring out the plumbing of how to deliver that money.
Yeah.
Because it was those first stimulus checks. Not everybody got them, but a lot more people got the second stimulus check on time. And then that child tax credit, where they were just literally direct depositing in parents'
Hmm.
bank accounts across the country.
Hmm.
I mean, that got to be pretty efficient. And
Yeah.
it also, you look now, it drove up the deficit, but that was also a deliberate choice. That didn't have
Yeah.
to be that way. Those
Yeah.
things could have been paid for by taxing certain things or
Yeah.
raising certain
Yeah. Yeah.
revenues if
Yeah.
they would have wanted.
And yeah, so that's essentially how we would pay for these things is through taxes, of course. I with AI and robotics especially, the GDP is going to keep going up by a lot, and so we need to kind of capture that, make sure that we are able to spread that wealth out, because that's the only way it's going to happen.
Yeah,
Is
a proposal I was kind of interested in. It's like one of the things that AI is really, and you'd have to get a different guest to talk about this because I have no idea how any of this
yeah,
works. But AI is very involved in the stock market. I
mm,
think
yeah,
I think it's something like a lot, like the more trade, the most of the trades are made now by robots and
yeah,
analytics.
yeah. It's been true for a while, long
Right.
time.
And so can you fractionally tax a single transaction of
Um,
that
yeah,
and generate how much money? You know what I mean? And then how
yeah,
does that change the
yeah.
algorithms for the AIs that are making these purchasing decisions?
Yeah,
And
you
who's that
could
take?
do that, although I don't know, how much that would be, how much that would help. Like the stock market really isn't where you'd want to get all of your money from. It would probably just be the values of these companies themselves, the revenue that they're generating, or rather profits that they're generating, because you shouldn't tax on revenue, of course, but the profits that they're generating. And I mean, I've personally talked about a wealth tax. I'm not sure how that would be done. There's a vague idea of like, well, this land is worth this much money, and therefore they should be taxed this much. Um, and of course, this would only be for like billions, right? Because I'm
Right.
pretty sure people are hoarding land. I think
Well, could I
Bill
get your
Gates owns
reaction?
like 1% of all farmland or something
Yeah.
like that. It's a ridiculous amount of farmland that he owns.
Here's a reaction I want to get. I proposing a maximum wage. Okay.
A maximum
So the
wage.
idea is we have a minimum wage, but if you
Yeah.
have $1 billion, if you actually have $1 billion, good
Hmm.
job, you did it. I think I saw some. This was an idea I stole from like somebody's random Reddit poster or a tweet or something,
Yeah.
and it was like you won capitalism. You get a certificate, you know, and then any other money you make is taxed. Sorry,
Yeah.
you don't need to make more money. You have a billion
I
dollars. You're good. You
I
know.
don't know if I'm for 100% tax rate, and also that's
Yeah.
not like an income tax either, because their wealth is different than income, right? So that's
Right.
like
So
not
you're
even a
saying not
maxed
income,
income. Yeah, a
wealth
lot of
tax.
them,
Okay.
a lot of them don't have very high incomes. Like even the best CEOs, they get like 35, 40 million a year, right? Which is insane. But 40 million a year, that's their taxable income, right?
Mm-hmm.
The wealth they have, right? They get stocks in those companies, and that stock is worth billions and billions. Um, and so that's where all their wealth is. And so you can try to tax that. But like a lot of people will then go to the argument that people are against taxing wealth is like art. It's like a lot of these billionaires, you can say that it could be just fraud or other issues, but like they will buy art. How much is art
Mm-hmm.
worth? How is that regulated, right? Oh, I buy, this one piece that's worth $10 million. Is it actually $10 million? Is it a lot less? Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing with that? It just seems like tax evasion, and you can argue that. That's a separate issue, though. I think a lot of their wealth is tied up in things that can be determined by market forces. So, like, if Bill Gates owns 1% of Montana, I'm pretty sure we can figure out how much that's worth through markets and be like, well, this land that you bought is worth $1 billion. We can tax that at like 3% or whatnot. And that would force him to probably sell that, which is, I think, good. I don't think he needs to own 1% of Montana or whatever.
Yeah, there's a kleptocracy at the top of,
Yeah, yeah,
especially the
yeah.
United States, where it's like you actually don't need all this stuff, and if we can
Yeah.
incentivize you to get rid of some of it and spread the wealth out
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. That's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
point. That's what I
Yeah.
am interested in
Yeah.
getting to.
Yeah.
So I do like I do like the idea of. I don't think it's. I think that there's a reason why in the 1950s, when tax rates on the highest
Mm-hmm.
bracket were 90%, our
Yeah.
economy was doing really well.
Yeah.
And I think that would have stopped some of the inflationary pressure as well to
Yeah.
be
Maybe. Yeah.
swallowing up some of the money at the top, especially like you were saying, where you tax profits, not revenue. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
company,
Yeah.
you had to pay X more to deal with inflation. Well, what we saw was that companies, sure, their cost increased a little, but then they increased the prices a lot and ate that as profit. We
Yeah.
could have taxed that to put pressure on inflation
Mm-hmm.
had we,
Yeah.
and would have been better.
Excessive profits, you can argue as well. Like, just have really, really high tax rates for profits that are above like 10 billion, 20 billions, things like that. Um, Again, I don't know how that would work out in the future. These things kind of don't work forever. You'd have to probably change those numbers a lot. Um, and who knows, maybe in the future as well with the idea of the age of surplus, when everyone has as what they need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we could see disinflation, right? Deflation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Deflation, because since everyone can do these robots and these robots can figure out a lot of efficiencies, then the prices might come down a lot. In which case, these tax rates might not matter so much either. So yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I definitely think a wealth tax is how you'd want to capture that. Again, the details I'm not sure, but
Yeah, and I'd say probably for posterity's sake, anything we're saying in this
mm-hmm.
conversation in October 2024, I mean, these would be great ideas to act on now,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
but I would
yeah.
assume that technology is going to keep progressing. We're going to keep learning things, and what would be great is if there's a government that recognizes, okay, we need to take huge action. We're talking moving billions, hundreds of billions, maybe even trillions of dollars. But we also need to be willing to change direction 10 years from now based on
Yeah,
updated
yeah, yeah,
circumstances.
absolutely. Yep, yep. Um, yeah, and that requires a government that can act quickly, though, which is a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how to fix that. That's more of a societal issue, right? Because we have created a government that represents a small minority, right? Like
Yeah.
even the House is heavily. I don't want to say gerrymandered. It's
Well,
not
it
proportional,
is,
right?
but yeah, it's not
It is
proportional either.
gerrymandered. I mean, not
Yeah.
proportional though, right? Because like, what was it in the 1960s? They decided to put a cap on the House to
Mm-hmm.
435. I
Mm-hmm.
forget the exact numbers. Um, and so like
They
that.
lifted it at different times over the history of America of how many total congressmen. So yeah, right now we're capped at 435.
Oh no, I thought it was supposed to be that like every we're supposed to have like every 40,000 people have one representative, and they did that continuously
And then
until they
that
decided to
might be
cap
it.
it.
That they then changed, that they set
Yeah,
the,
they just were like, this is enough people. We don't need any more than 435. And it's
yeah,
like, well, now California has a ridiculous number of people. They should have like 400 by themselves.
right.
And so that I think we're not, we don't have a government that represents us. So it's going to need a lot of changes. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to do that, but we'll need to have a lot of different changes.
Yeah, and some of those changes, I mean, we do still need to also build in protections against tyranny of the majority. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Because
I
some of
mean,
those changes
kind of
were
have the
meant to
ability
have
there.
but it's totally gotten way out of whack, absolutely, like you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And what I could really see building up, like I said, one little speculation that'd be fun to visit is as this becomes a bigger issue politically, and we were talking about like going back to the early conversation of should robots do law enforcement, should robots be making decisions, are
Mm-hmm.
people inherently smarter than robots? One of the places we're seeing this play out right now is cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
Initially, thoughts of driverless cars is really scary, and we did see some accidents, and you do see some people die, and it's like, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
that's unacceptable. And then you think about how many thousands of people die in human car accidents all the time, and
Yep.
that the evidence is
Humans
starting
make
to
a lot of mistakes.
suggest these robot-driven cars are actually safer,
Yeah.
just en
Yeah.
masse. and
Yeah.
uh, and so, are you going to get people advocating, saying, "No, we are voting to let the robots do it because we can't be
Yeah.
trusted"?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially nowadays. Personally, in Las Vegas, there's a lot of crazier people on the road, and it makes me
Yeah.
nervous going on the road every time.
Yeah.
Um, and I can't wait to just have something else take care of it. Just let the robots take care of it.
Hmm.
Um, which is not the answer to this podcast right now, ethics. Don't let the robots take care of it. We need to figure that out.
Yeah, and I think that's a good kind of conclusion of where I'm at now is we need to keep working on these ethics issues, but there isn't a solid like I don't have a core fundamental philosophy of what I think we need to absolutely
Yeah,
be doing on this. I think we're all sort of adapting and learning in real time and
yeah, and that's a
experimenting.
problem. I think that's a big problem is that we don't have any idea of how to approach this problem or what to do.
Hmm.
Um, or at least, if I do, but they're kind of still very vague and nebulous. And also, a lot of people haven't even thought about it at all. And so we need to get a lot of people on board. They need to hear these ideas. Everyone needs to think about them, and we need to take action on them. So we're still in a very early stage of all of this.
Well, I absolutely agree. I think that's awesome that you're doing this podcast because
Thank you.
there's definitely, you challenged some of my ideas. I learned more ideas. And I think, like you said, only through mass debate happening
Mm-hmm.
that, frankly, the AI should be a part of, right? That they should be
Yeah.
informing that debate too. I think
Yeah.
we'll start to arrive at some solutions because this is a huge problem that we need to work
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Vinny, for helping me out. And
Thank you so much.
yeah, if I have other ideas in the future and I ask you to come on, I hope you join again.
I'd be happy to. I look forward to listening and exploring and learning more about this topic from you in the future.
Thank you for listening. If you want to learn more about AI, you can go to the YouTube channel, Let's Talk About AI, where the videos of these podcasts will be posted and there will be links in the description of each video. Thank you.